For a period of approximately 4 months between September and December of 2018, I experienced a consistent and sustained effort by many people within the government to seek to politically interfere in the exercise of prosecutorial discretion in my role as the Attorney General of Canada in an inappropriate effort to secure a deferred prosecution agreement with SNC-Lavalin.
It was important for Jody Wilson-Raybould to speak openly at the Justice Committee today, and I'm glad she had the chance to do so. I strongly maintain, as I have from the beginning, that I and my staff always acted appropriately and professionally. I therefore completely disagree with the former Attorney General's characterization of events.
Well, there you have it, as we showed you in great length yesterday, over an hour's worth of commentary. Jody Wilson-Raybould meticulously laid out a very complicated campaign to get her to drop the criminal charges against SNC-Lavalin. 10 different phone calls, 10 different meetings, emails, text messages, threats, bullying, including from the Prime Minister himself. And you saw he simply waved it off yesterday at a partisan event. He didn't refute any of the details. He just said, no, I'm going to brazen it out. Well, will he get away with it? One person I've been following very carefully on Twitter to help me analyze the situation is our friend Manny Montenegrino. He is the boss of consultancy, a think tank, a one-man think tank in Ottawa, but for our purposes, he's also the former lawyer to Stephen Harper and a former national manager of a major law firm. Manny joins us now via Skype. Manny, I can hardly wait to hear your take on things. Jump right in. What do you make of yesterday's events?
Well, there is so much, Ezra, and I can stand here and say, as a lawyer, I am deeply, deeply offended. As a Canadian, I am deeply, deeply offended. I bring to you, Ezra, from a legal perspective of what happened. And when problems like this emerge, the very first thing I do is look at the criminal code, look at the act. Section 139(1) says, everyone who willfully attempts in any manner to obstruct, pervert, or defeat the course of a judicial proceeding is subject to a criminal penalty. Now, those words are pretty simple. It says, in any manner who willfully attempts. You listened to the ex-Attorney General. Her timeline was persistent and it continued. It went for 4 months unabated. 10 meetings, 11 emails, 11 people involved. The Prime Minister got 11 people involved to try to defeat the course of a judicial proceeding. It was willful. It was in any manner. Normally, the legislation thinks about 1 or 2 meetings. This is far past meets the test of 139(1). Ezra, it's even worse than that. I noted from the testimony of the Attorney General, as she then was, she made a point that alarmed me, and it hasn't been picked up. And that is the SNC-Lavalin received a lawyer from the Directors of Prosecution, received a letter saying, we will not proceed with a DPA. That was in October. What SNC-Lavalin did immediately, which they have the right to do, is go on a motion to a judge to say that the Attorney General is wrong. And they're entitled to do that. They could go to a court and say, we're entitled to the DPA. Now think of this, Ezra. We now have the Attorney General who said in September, we are not moving with a DPA. The Attorney General on September 17th tells the Prime Minister, we are not moving with a DPA. Legal counsel for SNC-Lavalin take a motion to the court. There's an active motion before a judge, and they continue the persistent lobbying and trying to manipulate and thwart the course of justice while there is a case before the courts. Right. I mean, that is unprecedented.
Let me jump in just for our viewers. As we described yesterday, DPA is deferred prosecution agreement. Manny, I know you're a lawyer and that's second nature to you. That's basically a fancy way of saying a plea bargain where this large engineering firm, SNC-Lavalin, could avoid the messiness and embarrassment of a trial and just basically pay money and say, yeah, we did it, don't take us to court. So, but you make such an important point, Manny, is that this wasn't just saying, hey, prosecutors, don't prosecute us anymore. The decision was made to prosecute. The decision was made not to give him a plea bargain. They properly appealed that to a judge. And still, Trudeau and Butts and team, they still tried to roll Jody Wilson-Raybould, even though it was before a judge now.
That is enormously important that everyone skipped over. There is an active case before a court, and they are still trying to manipulate and thwart justice. Now, Ezra, as well, you have to look. I was so impressed with the testimony of the ex-attorney general. She stood there for 4 hours. Her testimony was extremely credible. And why do I say that? It was sworn to a testimony. She was detailed. She was meticulous. She took comprehensive notes throughout the whole 4 months. She repeated the notes. She had details in time. Hers was not a political speech. And in law, when you have a witness that is giving evidence against their own interests, we have a Liberal cabinet minister that is destroying her career and future. There can't be a higher point of credibility of a witness. Every word that woman has said, every word that she had said is extremely credible. There were no political machinations, unlike the clerk. So when you look at the testimony, she is just maybe destroying her political career in order to get to the truth. That is credible, and that has to be given extreme great weight.
You know, that's such a good point. And Trudeau, who later said, oh, no, it's not true. No specificity, no specific refutations. In fact, he later said, oh, I didn't watch it, but whatever it wasn't true. Let me say one thing, and Manny, you would have more experience than this at this than me. The Attorney General, I mean, law is all about paperwork. There's a paper trail for everything. Everything's filed in triplicate, quadruplicate, copies here and there, files, notes. The civil service is very bureaucratic. I mean, you can call it red tape if you like, but nothing moves without paperwork. So if Jody Wilson-Raybould claims these phone calls happened, claims these meetings happened, there is undoubtedly minutes and memos and meetings and schedules and calendars. So I don't think it's even possible that she could be fibbing about if a meeting happened. And there were so many other people involved in these meetings, her deputy minister, her chief of staff, various advisors. I think it's absolutely credible that these things happen.
Yeah.
But
Ezra,
go ahead.
I wouldn't spend a second trying to challenge the testimony of Jody, our ex-attorney general. I wouldn't spend a second.
But here's the other side of that coin, Manny, and here's you know, and you and I have talked about this briefly. There's another case going on in Atlantic Canada right now, a Vice Admiral of the Navy who's been prosecuted by the Liberals, Scott Bryson resigned over it, and it came out that the PMO, that Justin Trudeau's office, had all these meetings about that case, and they kept no notes. Well, the only group I've ever heard of that has serious substantive meetings that don't keep notes is organized crime. They don't write things down because they don't want. So compare the gang that doesn't keep notes to this meticulous straight arrow who's keeping a lot of notes. I know who I believe.
Well, yeah, and you know what? You don't have to go far when you're putting the test of the credibility of the ex-attorney general, who basically has given up her standing, her cabinet post, perhaps be kicked out of the caucus. We haven't seen that yet. Everything to uphold the law versus the prime minister, who has been found by an independent judiciary, the ethics commissioner, 5 times to be in breach of ethics. And also she found him not to be credible in his testimony that the trip to the Aga Khan's private luxury island was because he was an old friend he hasn't seen for 30 years. The ethics commissioner, a justice equivalent to a judge, said, "I don't find you credible." Yeah. She struck down that evidence. So I don't need to be political about this. I have a person that has been found by a quasi-court to be not credible, and I have the Attorney General, ex-Attorney General, giving everything up in order to speak the truth. I am well past that. Yeah. So when I test credibility, it's not a political and it's not a partisan thing that I'm doing here. I've got my lawyer hat on. Right. There's no question any judge in the world would take the credibility of the Attorney General, who is acting against her own personal interests, whereas the Prime Minister is trying to keep his job. Yeah. There's no question as to who's more credible in this whole saga. Yeah. Now, let me, I am so offended, and I'm glad to see Jody WilsonRaybould's father come to her defense. I for some reason or another, I feel a kinship to him because I have a wonderful, strong daughter as he does. But he's coming to her defense, and for the Prime Minister sit there after hearing the testimony and saying that, well, it was always her decision. Let me give you an analogy, Ezra. This is like a guy who spent 4 months with 11 people to knock over a bank, and he's in the bank, and he finds this really strong, principled bank manager that holds him at bay and kicks him out, and then he comes out of there, the bank robber, to the police and says, well, wait a minute, it was always her decision to give me the money. She has not given me the money, so therefore everything's okay. That's not how the law works. Right. It's an attempt to obstruct justice. Right. It isn't trying to. The reason why he wasn't successful is because of Jody WilsonRaybould. The reason why he didn't succeed in taking the money from the bank is because the bank manager was principled and stopped it.
Right. Let's put up on the screen one more time Section 139. 1 right. of the Criminal Code, because you pointed out to me, look at the language there. Everyone who willfully attempts in any manner. So you just right. have to attempt. You don't have to be successful, and it can be in any manner. It doesn't have to be an undue manner or a heavy manner. Everyone who willfully attempts in any manner. And let me put up Section 139.2 just for 1 second here, because 139.2, this is the next paragraph. I'm just going to read this out, Manny. Obstructing justice. Everyone who willfully attempts in any manner other than a manner described in subsection 1 to obstruct, pervert, or defeat the course of justice is guilty of an indictable offense and liable to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 10 years. So this is heavy duty. I have a question for you. You've been talking about the ethics commissioner, Manny, but the worst that'll happen, I mean, Trudeau was convicted 5 times by the ethics commissioner. Slap on the wrist. But this is the criminal code. Will the cops get involved, Manny?
I think they have to get involved. And let me tell you, again, I go to the testimony of our ex-attorney general. She said she has a text from Gerald Butts, written confirmation, where he says there is no solution that doesn't include interference with the Attorney General. They understood that she stood her ground, and there's no solution to what the Prime Minister wanted other than interference. That is an admission of Section 139.1 breach. I mean, it is. You can't get any more clearer. So I say to you, when you ask me, Ezra, I compare to what happened to Senator Duffy. Senator Duffy, there was no sworn testimony. There was nothing except accusations of his expensing improperly. $90,000. Expensing a senator that has the ability to expense out of his own expense account $90,000. It was paid back, but there is still enough talk that the RCMP felt that they had to investigate. There were no sworn testimony. We have a sworn testimony from the highest lawmaker of Canada that's there protecting our judiciary. We have a sworn testimony, 4 hours of evidence saying there was a 4-month sustained, persistent attempt to breach the natural flow of justice, to breach a judicial proceeding. That wasn't there for Duffy. Yeah. And so when you ask me, should the RCMP get involved, I cannot see how they cannot get involved, given what they did with Duffy. Here's what has to happen, Ezra. Number one, there has to be a full and wholesome investigation by the RCMP. Number two, there has to be charges laid, because I can just simply myself point to, as I did with the text and the evidence given by the Attorney General, there are charges related. And of course, and let me be very clear, everyone enjoys the due process, the presumption of innocence, but the only people that can decide as to whether there is a criminal code breach is not the Attorney General, it's not Manny, it's not you, it's not any media, it's no one, it is a court. It is a judge where there's a wholesome proceeding. And if that happens, then that is where there's either guilt or not guilty. So it has to happen, in my opinion. Yeah.
Well, yesterday, Jody WilsonRaybould said something that was that line about Gerald Butts saying there's going to be interference one way or another. That's a smoking gun. But she also said that once they had run out of patience with her, because she had blocked this for 4 months, that they said to her chief of staff, or deputy minister, I can't remember which, they said, we're going to have a new attorney general, and the first thing he's going to do is deal with SNC-Lavalin. So they gave away the game. And again, remember, this is corroborated by the other people she says, the chiefs of staff, the deputy ministers. So that new attorney general is a Montreal old boy named David Lametti, who is from McGill, just like Trudeau and Gerald Butts. He's part of the Liberal scene in that city. He was actually lobbied directly by SNC-Lavalin, according to the Office of the Lobbyist Commissioner. And he said on TV a couple of weeks ago that he felt no need to investigate because he took the Prime Minister at his word. And he actually said he was still considering giving the plea bargain, the DPA, Deferred Prosecution Agreement, to SNC-Lavalin. How can David Lametti, the new Attorney General, either stay on that position or even stay in the job, given what we saw yesterday?
Ezra, I don't even want to mention that man's name. As a lawyer for 32 years, he has offended every position and every tenet of the law. He is not worthy of it. He is the exact opposite. How proud I felt of our ex-Attorney General reaching the highest form of ethics and duty to Canada. He is the polar opposite. And I don't even want to give him a second of time. It is embarrassing that someone who is in charge of upholding Canada's laws says, I won't even investigate. I just accept the Prime Minister's word, and moves along and is happy and gleeful that he's got the cabinet post. He took the cabinet post of a very ethical, Indigenous woman. This old boy from Montreal took the cabinet post because he was prepared to sacrifice Canada's judicial system. Ezra, there's another point that as you can see, I'm charged up. Yeah. And it's because it's a lot, because it affects everything that I've done for 32 years. It's an attack on my profession. It's an attack on law. It's an attack on Canada. This country is great because we have a great judicial system. Simple. Now, this is where it really gets emotional for me. As you know, Ezra, on December 12th, 2 Canadians were kidnapped and put in jail in China because there's a retaliation for the Huawei CEO being put in custody in Canada. These 2 Canadians and one other Canadian got his sentence changed to a 10-year to death. We are going to lose a Canadian. He's going to die, and 2 other Canadians are there, and 13 others were also. But this happened on December 12th. Ezra, the timeline is very important. On December 12th, Canadians were caught, and the Prime Minister, I don't know how despicable a person can do by sitting is watching Canadians. The Prime Minister is there to protect Canadians, to sit there and go on TV and say, we can't do anything because we are a rule of law country, while he has been spending 4 months to try to help another company, not Huawei, SNC. I mean, I don't care which company you talk about, but he's trying 4 months. And on December 19th, 7 days after, the full force pressure with the clerk of the Privy Council under the Prime Minister's thumb, trying to force the Attorney General to break a rule of law while Canadians are sitting in jail, and he lets them perish. There can be no greater offense to me, a person who believes in natural justice, a person who believes in Canadians, a person who believes that the Prime Minister has to protect every Canadian, to sit there letting people rot in jail for our rule of law while he breaks the rule of law for SNC-Lavalin.
Yeah, that's a very powerful contrast. I want to ask you about something I've seen on Twitter. I mean, we all watched. I was riveted, and like you, I was emotionally touched by the fact that someone would take such an ethical stand. I can't imagine standing up to the Prime Minister and 10 of his henchmen and looking him in the eye and saying, "I will not move." I don't know where she got that courage. Obviously, from her dad, who was a fighter in his own day too.
And her name is. I mean,
her name means,
her
good host,
indigenous name. Yeah, her indigenous name. And she says, I come from a matriarch of people that speak the truth. This, Ezra, if you go back in my tweets, I called it from the beginning. A lot of people are saying, oh, no, it's a setup. I saw this. I don't know the ex-Attorney General, but what I saw was a completely principled individual from a strong family, and I saw that this would happen.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like it in my whole life in Canada.
No.
Now, I was recording my show last night, so I didn't see it live, but I saw on Twitter that she was asked, why did you stay in cabinet at all, given what happened? And I haven't watched the video clip myself to verify, but I read that someone reported that her answer was, because I wanted to stay in cabinet to make sure he didn't sneak this deal through even after I left.
Yes.
That's an incredible statement. So she actually stayed around to see that through to justice. If that report I read is accurate, that's amazing.
That's exactly what she said, and that is why she is incredibly credible. Oh, why? And it is offensive to me. I mean, I sit there and cringe when I saw the Justice Committee lawyers, and I tweeted about it, the Justice Committee MPs the Liberals questioning her and her integrity. And I was saying, how foolish. You have a witness that is totally credible, and you're asking, well, why didn't you come forward sooner? It was embarrassing. They should be ashamed of themselves. Yeah. But these, for lack of a better word, these are punks trying to outsmart a very smart lawyer. Yeah. And I laughed at it. I would have let the Liberals keep asking questions till May, because they were doing themselves more harm. Yeah. It is Ezra, to kind of look at everything, and there's so much about this case that people have to look at. We have seen that clearly the Prime Minister and 11 others are prepared to corrupt the rule of law. Yeah. I mean, that is without question. But there's something else that we need to talk about, Ezra, and that also came out with the testimony. The Chief of Staff, Telford, she said to the Attorney General, I know it's not your opinion, but if you change your mind, we can get a lot of friendly, I don't know if she used the word friendly, but a lot of op-eds in a lot of journals to support your new illegal decision.
Right.
Now, Ezra, I believe in the media. I think a great country needs an independent, free-thinking media. You see me tweeting all the time when I see biased media. I think, as much as I think that the law is the most important thing that a great country can have, basically a free unencumbered judicial system, I believe that the second, if not close to first, is a free media. We have an admission by the Attorney General of Canada, or then was, that the Prime Minister has available to him media at his beck and call to set the narrative of what may be an illegal act. And that, to me, so Ezra, I look at the corruption, the possible corruption of the justice system. I look at the admitted corruption of the free media, our independent media. And then the third one, which really also bothers me, is the corruption of our bureaucracy, our independent bureaucracy. The testimony of Michael Wernick compared to the testimony of the ex-Attorney General, I mean, he was more biased than David Lametti in his trumping the liberal brand and helping Justin Trudeau. Yeah. So what this whole case, when I look at it, and I carefully looked at it hours and hours and hours, is we have evidence of corruption of our judicial system. We have evidence of corruption of our independent media, and we have evidence of corruption of our independent bureaucracy. And these are provable facts from the words of the Attorney General. When you have the three most important things being corrupted by a government, we are no longer Canada. We are Venezuela, Cuba. I don't care what analogy you want to use. But when you are corrupting the independence of our judiciary, when you are corrupting the independence of our media, and I don't want to get into that $600 million, I'm trying to stay straight with the facts and the evidence that the Attorney General gave. And when you have a clerk trying to incite and emote Canadians and gave a political speech, and you saw the ex-Attorney General, it wasn't politics, and she's a politician. It was pure fact. That's what we should have heard from Michael Wernick.
Wow. We're talking with Manny Montenegrino, former managing partner of a national law firm and the CEO of Think Sharp. Manny, you've been very generous with your time and very thoughtful analysis. I have two final questions for you. I've seen on Twitter this morning Chrystia Freeland, the foreign minister, saying that she believes Jody Wilson-Raybould, and I'm sure she does. And I see Selina Cesar-Chavannes, another Toronto area MP who was parliamentary secretary to Trudeau. Now she's parliamentary secretary for some other thing. So these are a front bench cabinet minister, Chrystia Freeland, and a parliamentary secretary, which is a pretty good gig. It's like a junior cabinet minister. They're both saying they believe her, but neither of them has stepped down from cabinet, and they're just giving this virtue signaling tweet. What should a Liberal do if a Liberal watched what we watched and felt how we felt, and as Freeland and Cesar-Chavannes say they feel? What's the right thing for them to do? I don't think it's sustainable to say I believe these charges of corruption against Trudeau, but I'm willing to remain in Trudeau's cabinet. What should these women do? What should any women or men in caucus or cabinet do?
Well, clearly, I mean, what should happen, and Andrew Scheer of the Conservative Party got it right. He said that the Prime Minister has to step down. You have serious allegations of criminal conduct by 11 people in your close top circle. There's nothing else you can do but step down. And if he steps down, they can stay in place and do their job and be great Liberals and do and move towards their common goal. But if he does not step down, you're right. They are put in a position. Now, what I think is happening, Ezra, I mean, which is just absurd. There's so much evidence of culpability. You have Gerald Butts, who left, resigned. You cannot say your best friend, Prime Minister, you've known since university, your closest friend resigns, and you say there's nothing there. Now, you know that can't be true. So you have, and by the way, it was Gerald Butts who recruited the ex-Attorney General. They are friends prior. He recruited her. So Jody was recruited by Gerald Butts. So when you have Jody So that's why he's resigned. He knows that he's in deep trouble. So when you ask me that question, it's an interesting. You have a Liberal MP who stood under oath and said, I don't trust the cabinet, I don't trust the prime minister, or pretty much laid out a criminal case against the prime minister, and she still remains a Liberal. And the prime minister was asked, are you going to get rid of her? Well, let me think about that. Well, you know why he can't get rid of her? Because the moment he gets rid of the most ethical Liberal in that party, and I'm sure she's got great support, is when they will all step down. So that's why they're not stepping down, because there's faint hope that the prime minister might do something right. And you know, I loved Jodie's testimony when she said, why did, you know, when this, you know, just the foolish questions by the Liberal people on the Justice Committee. I mean, completely ignorant people who are trying to cross-examine a very brilliant lawyer. But when she replied to one of them, and I forget which it was, but one of those, and she said, I waited and waited, and I took the prime minister after the December 19th. Why didn't you do something? Why didn't you stand up? Because I took the prime minister's word. She felt that the prime minister finally got the message until she got kicked out of her position. These fools on the Justice Committee, these Liberal fools don't understand the gravity and don't understand the force that they are against. And Jody WilsonRaybould is, I tell you, I have seen hundreds and hundreds of lawyers, and I've been with great lawyers. And let me tell you, I have never been more impressed with her testimony, and more impressed with her protection of Canadian law. And what I love about it, Ezra, and boy, you learn a lot in life, and even at my age, you learn a lot. But when the female Aboriginal lawyer, Indigenous lawyer, says that a lot of Canada's problems with the Indigenous people were related to not observing the rule of law by we'll say, the then corrupt government. This is the person that's speaking truth to justice.
Yeah, isn't that true? I got one last question for you, Manny.
Sure.
As I mentioned earlier, you're not just a keen analyst and observer. You're not just someone who has a lot of experience with lawyers running a large firm, but you yourself were an advisor, the lawyer, to a prime minister, Stephen Harper.
Right.
So I want to give you a tough question. Put aside your own moral and political thoughts on things and pretend for a moment that you were the private lawyer to Justin Trudeau. So your duty is to your client, Trudeau. What legal advice would you give Justin Trudeau, having seen what you've seen?
Well, I mean, right now, I think the ex-Attorney General, Jody, did give her great advice. I thought she was brilliant advising the prime minister that be careful. You are treading, this is in September, you're treading on very, very dangerous ground. He does not listen to good advice. I mean, it's clearly, I mean, I could go through. But if I were advising him, and if I were advising the 11 people named, I would get a big horn, one of those big horns, go into and let out that big foghorn to get them out of their arrogant, self-loving world that they think they're in with all the power, because the law is a different world. I can't believe how many times, and I've been in meetings, Ezra, as you know, the problem with the PMO as it stands now, there isn't a lawyer in there. I don't think there is. I mean, I looked, I tried to find out. I know Jerry Butch isn't a lawyer. I know the Prime Minister isn't a lawyer. I know Katie Telford's not a lawyer. There are no lawyers in there. A lawyer would have said, in that room, would have said, guys, wake up. We're into serious stuff. So there isn't a lawyer in that room. So the advice I give to everyone there now, get yourself a very good criminal lawyer. As for the Prime Minister, I mean, I would love to see him resign. Yeah. I mean, sometimes, the Attorney General put Canada ahead of her political career, ahead of her job. you would expect that the Prime Minister do the same.
Yeah.
And he is the last person that would put Canada ahead of anything that he seeks or desires. And we've seen too many examples of that.
Wow. Well, another masterclass in law, politics, and patriotism by our friend Manny Montenegrino. What a great pleasure. Thank you so much, not only for your time, but for your wisdom. It's clear you have studied this very carefully. In fact, I'm going to follow up on my own time some of the leads you've mentioned here today, Manny. Just great to have you with us today.
Thank you. No problem, Ezra.
There you have
Take
it,
care.
Manny Montenegrino, the CEO of Think Sharp and former lawyer to Stephen Harper. That's an excerpt from the Ezra Levant show. Every day I do a video monologue and then I interview an interesting guest and then I end by reading my hate mail. But you've got to subscribe to it, which you can do at therebel.media/shows.